Good morning, everyone. I want to start with a question. Have you ever met someone who was absolutely certain they were brilliant at something, and yet every piece of evidence suggested otherwise? Maybe it was a colleague who insisted they were a great presenter while putting the room to sleep, or a friend who fancied themselves a master chef while burning toast. That gap between confidence and competence isn't just an annoying personality quirk. It's a well-documented cognitive bias called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Over the next half hour, we're going to unpack what this bias really is, where it came from, why it's controversial, and most importantly, what you can do about it. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. This bias isn't about other people. It's about all of us. Here's how we'll navigate this topic. We'll start by defining exactly what the Dunning-Kruger effect is and isn't, because popular culture has mangled this concept badly. Then we'll dive into the original 1999 study that launched 1,000 debates. From there, we'll visualize the famous confidence-competence curve, explore concrete examples from everyday life, and examine the flip side, why true experts often doubt themselves. We'll then address the elephant in the room, the growing body of criticism arguing the effect might be a statistical artifact. Finally, we'll land on practical implications, what this means for how you hire, lead, learn, and make decisions. Let's begin at the beginning. What exactly is the Dunning-Kruger effect? I want to be precise here because this is one of the most frequently misunderstood concepts in psychology. The popular version you've heard, "stupid people think they're smart," is a crude caricature. The real phenomenon is both more nuanced and more unsettling. It's about a specific domain-bound cognitive trap. The skills you need to perform well are the very same skills you need to evaluate your own performance. If you lack those skills, you're doubly cursed. You do poorly, and you can't tell you're doing poorly. Let's look at the formal definition. Here's the formal definition in 6 key points. First, this is a cognitive bias, a systematic error in thinking, not a personality flaw. Second, it was discovered and named by David Dunning and Justin Kruger at Cornell in 1999, which we'll explore in a moment. Third, and this is the crucial insight, the skills that make you competent are the exact same skills that allow you to judge competence. If you can't construct a grammatically correct sentence, you also can't recognize grammatical errors, including your own. Fourth, this creates what we might call a double curse. Not only do you perform poorly, but you're literally unable to perceive that poor performance. Fifth, and listen closely to this one because it's widely misunderstood, the effect is domain-specific. You might be a world-class surgeon with terrible financial instincts, and you'd exhibit the decay effect in finance but not in surgery. Finally, David Dunning himself has repeatedly corrected the popular misconception that this is about stupid people. It's about specific skill deficits in specific areas. We all have blind spots. Let's walk through the original experiment, because the numbers are striking. Dunning and Kruger recruited Cornell undergraduates and tested them across 3 domains. Humor. They had to rate the funniness of jokes compared to professional comedians' ratings. Logical reasoning and English grammar. Then they asked each student to estimate their own percentile rank. The results were jaw-dropping. Students who scored in the bottom quartile, around the 12th percentile, believed they were above average, estimating themselves around the 62nd percentile. That's a 50-point gap between perception and reality. Meanwhile, top performers, those in the 86th percentile and above, actually underestimated themselves slightly, placing themselves around the 75th. Here's the part that really drives the point home. After the researchers gave the low performers a bit of training and showed them examples of good work by peers, those same students dramatically revised their self-assessments downward. They didn't become more competent overnight, they just became slightly more aware of what competence looks like, and that was enough to puncture their illusion. Now let's visualize this. The Dunning-Kruger effect is often depicted as a curve, and while the exact shape is debated, the pattern is remarkably consistent across domains. What you see is a striking divergence between how confident people feel and how competent they actually are, especially at the early stages of learning. Let me show you the classic representation, based on the original study data. Take a close look at these bars. On the left, the bottom quartile. Their actual performance sits around the 12th percentile, meaning 88% of people did better than them. Yet their self-assessment? The 62nd percentile. They genuinely believed they were above average. Now scan across to the second and third quartiles. The gap narrows but persists. And on the far right, the top quartile. Actual performance around the 86th percentile, but self-assessment around the 75th. These are people who are genuinely excellent, yet they underestimate themselves. The irony is sharp. The least competent are the most confident, and the most competent are the most humble. Now, I should note that this chart uses approximate values drawn from the pattern described in the original 1999 paper. The exact numbers vary by domain and replication. But the shape you're seeing here has been reproduced across dozens of studies and domains. These aren't just laboratory curiosities. The Dunning-Kruger effect plays out in vivid, sometimes dangerous ways in everyday life. Take driving. Novice drivers, especially teenagers, are vastly overrepresented in accident statistics. And a major factor isn't recklessness, it's that they literally cannot perceive the hazards they haven't yet learned to recognize. In the workplace, the pattern is so consistent, it's almost a law. New hires brim with confidence that far exceeds their actual contribution. Then, as they learn enough to understand the complexity, their confidence dips, sometimes dramatically, before slowly rebuilding on a foundation of genuine skill. The political domain is particularly troubling. Studies show that people who consume the narrowest range of news sources, who live in the most curated information bubbles, express the highest confidence in their political knowledge. And in healthcare, the rise of internet self-diagnosis has created a generation of patients who arrive at doctors' offices already convinced they know what's wrong, sometimes dismissing specialist advice based on 15 minutes of web searching. Each of these examples follows the same underlying logic. You don't know what you don't know. Now let's flip the lens, because the Dunning-Kruger effect has a mirror image that's equally important and far less discussed. High performers, genuine experts, systematically underestimate their abilities. Why? Because as you learn more about a field, you become acutely aware of how much you don't know. The horizon of your ignorance expands faster than your knowledge. There's a related bias at work here called the curse of knowledge. Once you understand something deeply, it becomes almost impossible to imagine not understanding it, so you assume tasks that are easy for you must be easy for everyone. This is the cognitive underpinning of imposter syndrome, that persistent feeling among high achievers that they're frauds about to be exposed. Meanwhile, people with minimal competence feel no such doubt because they lack the frame of reference to question themselves. The organizational implication is sobering. How many brilliant, self-doubting people get passed over for promotion in favor of confident mediocrity? It happens every day. Up to this point, I've been presenting the Dunning-Kruger effect as established psychological fact, but I owe you intellectual honesty. The effect is under serious academic fire. A growing number of researchers argue that what looks like a profound cognitive bias might actually be, at least in part, a statistical mirage. Let's examine both sides of this debate, because the answer has real consequences for how seriously we take the phenomenon. Let me walk you through both columns because this debate matters. On the critique side, the argument is elegant and troubling. When you measure anything with error and both self-assessment and performance measurement contain error, regression to the mean will naturally produce a pattern where people at the bottom overestimate and people at the top underestimate. It's just how noisy data behaves when you plot it. The Glaser test specifically checks whether the variance in self-assessment differs by skill level in the way the DK hypothesis predicts, and several papers, including a 2023 replication by Hiller, have found that it often doesn't. On the defense side, Dunning and others point out that the effect appears in too many different experimental setups, with too many different measurement approaches, to be purely statistical noise. The training intervention in the original study is especially hard to explain away. If the effect were purely regression to the mean, why would training reduce the gap? And even if we grant the statistical critique, the real-world pattern, Overconfident novices making bad decisions doesn't go away. Whether we call it the Dunning-Kruger effect or noisy self-assessment in low-information environments, the practical problem remains identical. Let's bring this down to earth with practical implications, because theory without action is just entertainment. First, hiring. If you're still asking candidates, rate your skills on a scale of 1 to 10, you're essentially measuring confidence, not competence. Structured interviews, blinded work samples, and skills-based assessments give you actual signal. Second, for your own learning journey, the moment you feel completely, unshakably certain about a topic is the exact moment you should get suspicious. Certainty is often a symptom of shallow understanding. Third, for leaders in the room, ask yourselves honestly, does your team culture reward the person who confidently announces an answer, or the person who thoughtfully says, "I'm not sure, let me look into that"? Most organizations say they value humility while systematically rewarding overconfidence. Fourth, actively seek disconfirming evidence. Appoint a devil's advocate, commission a red team, ask someone to prove you wrong. And finally, the single most powerful antidote to the DK effect is external feedback. You cannot see your own blind spots by definition. You need mirrors. Regular, honest, structured feedback from people you trust is the calibration tool your brain was never equipped with. Let me leave you with this. The Dunning-Kruger effect, whether you view it as a robust cognitive bias or a partly statistical phenomenon, points to the same fundamental truth. Self-assessment is alarmingly unreliable. The least competent among us, and that includes each of us in some domain, walk through life unaware of what we're missing. The most competent among us underestimate their gifts and sometimes hold back when they should speak up. But there is an antidote, and it's not complicated. It's intellectual humility. It's the habit of asking, what am I missing? It's surrounding yourself with people who will tell you when you're wrong. It's treating your own confidence as a signal to investigate, not a signal to act. In a world that rewards loud certainty, the quiet voice that says, I might be wrong, let's find out, is not weakness. It's the clearest signal of genuine competence there is. Thank you.